Hello darlings, and welcome back to the channel. Today I have something slightly different here, as it's going to be just a short little video, not really an essay, and I wanted to talk about this new game that just came out, Robocop Rogue City. Now, it seems like it's kind of just become a busy video game release season all of a sudden, and in between making so many other political videos, of which I have 3 big essays in the works right now, I've also been working on video essays for Alan Wake 2 and Spider-Man in between weekly streaming, so it's safe to say I've been pretty busy. That being said, I still wanted to take some time and show for this game that might be overlooked, but I feel like it definitely shouldn't be. If you've followed me or my channel for a while, you know that I am a huge fan of Teon's previous game, Terminator Resistance. I was a fan leading up to the game's release a couple years back, and I have proselytized about it ever since. I think it is a game with a lot of jank, but also a lot of heart, and the developer has a clear passion for the source material. That same passion is incredibly evident in the recently released Robocop Rogue City, and if you've been on FPS Twitter or follow any other FPS channels, you've probably seen it talked about already. But I still wanted to do a very short semi-review video to talk about why I think it's so special and why it actually holds up the satirical memory of Paul Verhoeven's original masterpiece. In fact, I'm proud to say that this is probably one of my favorite games of the year, and I've played a lot of shooters, which if you know the channel, you know me and know that that's definitely true. And Robocop Rogue City is one of my favorite shooters in recent memory. I can't remember a time a first-person shooter had me grinning this gleefully or so eager to see what happened next, both in terms of gameplay and story. Plenty of other games this year have been great in that same way, but when it comes to shooters, it's been something of a dry spell outside of big names and multiplayer shooters like Apex, Overwatch, and of course Call of Duty. And being a primarily left-leaning channel, I can already hear everybody boo, hiss, this is propaganda, but much like the Paul Verhoeven original film, the satire of Robocop in Rogue City is heavily intact. This is a cartoonish world with good guys and bad guys and scummy corporate businessmen trying to profit off of the poor while they fight. Like the titular character, it appears to be lunk-headed and slow, intent on nothing but destruction, but I think the original approach to satire manages to be reborn thanks to the obvious love and passion for the source material from developer Teon. I'd even say the satire has been cleverly extended to the gaming medium through gameplay, with the ridiculously over-the-top barrage of gore and explosions playing like a parody of video game power fantasies. Like all good satire, it has an innate understanding of why people like cop media, and that's the power fantasy which the game gleefully indulges in. It's part of why the original Robocop has stood the test of time so well, and by extending that same critical eye to the overindulgences of power so many gamers crave, I think Robocop Rogue City likewise delivers a slick, ultra-violent action romp that plays like every action hero cop wet dream, but it's so cartoonishly detached from any semblance of reality in its violence that it becomes darkly comedic. Much like the original, it can easily be read as a comedic indictment of how justice is sought under capitalist overlords. I could go on at length about this and themes and all that stuff, and I may in a future essay, but for now, I just want to mention that the satire is absolutely still intact, and for that reason, I don't think this is a case of propaganda, which I'll talk about additionally in just a couple minutes. But first, that gets me right to the gameplay. Everything in Robocop has a real heft to it. The shooting and aiming is very chunky with really heavy feedback, and I think that both the speed of the gameplay and the amount of enemies they throw at you so accurately captures that feeling of being a walking tank. It finally balances a challenge almost in a way that reminds me of X-Men Origins Wolverine, where you still feel like an unstoppable killing machine, even if you can die in the game if you play too poorly. And that power fantasy feedback starts at about a 9, from like the very first room that you breach in slow motion that just explodes everywhere because there are red barrels strategically left all over the place. The game just continues to kick it up from there with a ridiculous amount of upgradable powers and abilities that can transform your weapon, for example, into a unlimited firing just barrage of death. Of course, Robocop also has his strength that he can use, and you can throw things that explode. Almost everything in this game explodes. People explode, motorcycles explode, you can make dumpsters explode, and you just throw things everywhere all the time, and especially during slow motion breach sequences, it is so endlessly satisfying. This game also has what I would say a little bit of Fear DNA in that you have a kind of slow down ability, much like Fear, and it's much shorter, but like Fear, it can be upgraded. And it's so fun to pop off headshots and reach for propane tanks and throw them at strategically placed piles of other propane tanks to just blow everything up. It's ridiculous, it's dumb, and it's so satisfying. But again, in keeping with the original film it was based on, this version of Robocop doesn't just have action, but also indulges the more emotional and human side of the world. The way it explores Murphy's trauma amid personal loss is incredibly interesting, with sequences like sitting down with a shrink, with dialogue choices that will affect the outcome of the story and the way people feel about Murphy. While there are tons of loving, winking nods to the original and Robocop 2, this is a great example, much like Terminator Resistance, of a developer who understands the original creative vision without being slavishly devoted to it. Rogue City doesn't just retread the path of the original Robocop, but actually takes some very interesting chances with even familiar characters. It's willing to deviate in some really surprising ways, and I totally appreciate it for that. Another point against this being just pure propaganda is how much Robocop emphasizes the good of working in the community and how much more of the public good is actually served by Robocop directly interacting with that community and supporting people in local neighborhoods. Part of what makes Robocop such a fantasy of a police officer isn't just his strength, but also his ability to empathize and treat everyone as equal, something that real-world police officers have a real hard time doing. As an example, you come across a mentally unwell man in an early game side quest as part of a murder investigation. And while the other cops are eager to call him crazy, Robocop, being an illustration of a perfect cop in a perfect world, listens patiently, doesn't demean him, and kindly recommends mental health services. Robo takes the man's testimony seriously while the other cops see him as a lost cause, and that choice from Robo ends up solving the murder. There are also loose morality systems tying player choices to story outcomes, encouraging you to balance upholding the law and serving the public trust as Robocop's two primary objectives, and the game often cleverly pits the two against each other, asking the player if they want to be punitive or understanding and empathetic in this cold and cruel world. It is so good. Outside of the core of the gameplay, the graphics shine, especially in nighttime where the pavement literally shines. Just hella ray tracing all up in this business. If you've watched my shooter series and heard me talk about games like Condemned, you know I am a massive fan of dilapidated urban decay, and Robocop has amazingly detailed environments in spades throughout. Much like Terminator Resistance, a lot of the levels revolve around these semi-hub environments that really speak to some of the game's very obvious immersive sim influences. However, much more than Terminator Resistance, they feel alive here with different conversations going on everywhere as you pass through, and people actually interacting with Robocop and saying things to him as he walks by. I have come to really love exploring these districts, hearing all of the different little bits of dialogue, finding side cases and notes and hidden criminal objects. And it really reminds me of games like Vampire the Masquerade in how much it not just encourages exploration, but how fun that exploration actually is. Then you've got the character models. Look, the thing about this game is that it's from a small studio and can lovingly be labeled as Eurojank, which means that it's punching way above its weight in scale and storytelling, and the presentation here sometimes suffer for it. The lip sync, for example, can be rough. Characters up close look iffy. Voice acting, aside from Lewis and Murphy, is spotty. And there's no shortage of visual glitches during combat as enemies ragdoll from explosions and commonly get stuck in walls in the environment. But none of that should stop you from picking this up. Robocop Rogue City is a labor of love, crafted to expand the original while staying true to the vision of this 1980s future Detroit's broken world. And even if it has some rough edges, this is the perfect example of a game that is worth seeing through in spite of its flaws. The core experience here, from the gameplay to the branching choices, is so interesting and fun and stands out so much in the current gaming landscape. I can't help but recommend it to anybody, even if they're not necessarily a fan of shooters, because it's so fun and engaging. It might not be the slickest thing out there, it might not last 100 hours or have a battle pass or content roadmap, but it's still one of the best shooters this year, and is made with obvious care and love. So if you find yourself craving a good action game or are questioning what shooter to buy this season, maybe skip over the game that has a 3-hour campaign recycled for multiplayer maps, and go pick up Robocop Rogue City. Hello everybody, and thank you for watching. This is obviously a bit different from what I've been doing recently, but I wanted to get back in the swing of making videos because I am working on several videos that will be a bit longer right now. I'm looking at probably half hour to an hour on a lot of them. So those take a lot of time to go through and do, especially the political ones, as I do a lot of research. If you enjoyed this content or any of my other content, be sure to like, subscribe, share, do all the things. And then also, if you would like to help me not worry as much about bills while I am taking time to do this exacting style of research, please check out the links down below to help donate some bucks or donate a couple bucks to my Patreon. I currently don't have any sponsors because I haven't found any that are right for me. Not saying I won't get any in the future, but I pretty much live off of what I make from Patreon and from doing this channel. That being said, I know more people like my gaming content, and I want to start doing that a little bit more. And if this video does well and people enjoy it enough, I may start doing these just quick, shorter review videos, because I do enjoy spreading my opinions, especially about new games, and I kind of only end up doing it in streams lately. Speaking of streams, you can always go catch the newest streams down at twitch.tv/deaddomain. And thank you very much for watching. Check out my other shooter videos, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Go play Robocop.